Connection has been checked and we are live. Welcome to the SitRep for today, the 22nd of March, 2023. We're getting along in the tooth of the third month of this year. So here we go. What is happening? So this is a SitRep situation report where I go through news stories that I've found interesting from many different reasons, mainly from the prepping perspective, so we can keep abreast of what's going on in the world and best prepare ourselves as preparedness-minded individuals, but also stories where I go, well, I actually deleted one story I was going to talk about today because I was just too frustrated. It was that kind of stuff where I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is how our civilization is collapsing. And I'm like, I don't even want to talk about it. I don't want to exacerbate this thing right now. And I don't want to increase my blood pressure so much this morning. But let's talk about some stuff that actually matters. First off, I just want to say thank you very much for everyone who joins me on these. I really appreciate it. And hopefully there's something worthwhile that I'm putting out here that doesn't waste your time. There's a lot of stuff. Our attention span, the time in minutes in which we spend staring at things, is literally commodified today, and people are vying for your attention. Important people, your family members, they're all looking for your attention. So the fact that you're actually giving me some of that attention, I appreciate, and hopefully I can make it worthwhile. I do something worthy of that. Good morning to you, Reagan, on YouTube, and good morning to everyone on Instagram, or those who are listening to this after the fact on the audio version, on the podcast version. I want to start off with some good news today. Well, shock horror, I know. What's going on? I don't listen to this channel for good news. I want to feel bad about the world. No, this is actually some good news. It's something that I ranted a lot about and talked a lot about. It was around the Dutch farmers. So just to refresh your memory on what's happening there, the Dutch government is actively trying to shut down their farming industry to cripple the farmers by basically blaming it on climate change and saying, hey, we got to get the nitrogen output down, and we're going to do that. Our footprint is going to come down by us closing down farms, or making it much more difficult for farmers to farm in the way that they're doing it. So ergo, they will naturally probably close down and disappear. Well, the Dutch farmers did not take that lying down, and nor should they, nor should any of us. And I talked about this one quite a bit because I was quite passionate about it. I think farming is something that of all the things we could take out of our life, are all the things that we could say, hey, we're going to save the planet and do whatever climate blah, blah, blah stuff. And there's many, many different ways we can do that. Why start with farms? Why attack farms? Why attack our food system, the thing that sustains humans? And this is being done by people who live in a city, who I would argue probably have very little to do with farms. It would not shock me if politicians like this have never actually stepped foot on a farm in any real way, apart from like, oh, how quaint, a farm that I've come to visit and I can see animals and stuff. They live in the city, they go to a supermarket, they just assume that food comes out of thin air. And then they make rules like this, like, hey, look, we're going to just... I drove into work today in my car, and I did fly around the world 3 times this year. Don't worry about that. I need to get your cows to stop farting. That's the problem. So just destroy your livelihood, ruin your life, upend everything for me, and so we can get those numbers down. Otherwise, young Greta's going to be... she's going to be on my back. You don't want Greta on your back. Look out for Greta. But good news is what this is about. The Dutch farmers in 2019 actually started a political party, which, if I have the name of it somewhere around here, it's obviously in Dutch, so I can't really remember what it's called. Anyway, no, here it is. The BBB, the Boer Burger Beweging. I can't speak any Dutch, so I don't know what any of that means. But in English translation is the Farmer Citizen Movement Party. came in 2019, as I said. They just went to the polls, and they were looking at, this is in their Senate. The first exit poll projected BBB won 15 of the total 75 seats, which is a huge jump for them. The ruling party, the VVD, has dropped from 12 to 10 seats. So people are pretty unhappy with what's actually happening there. And they've voted. They've gone out and actually voted and made a difference. So that's really good news. That and shocked people as well. People were not expecting this. People weren't expecting the Dutch Farming Party to get up and actually do this. But obviously, what they've done has worked. They've been protesting. The types of protests and that, I'm always a bit like, we got to be pretty wary about this sort of stuff. It's kind of like the climate protests. I'm like, you're going to be pissing off more people than you're actually like helping out here. So I get the theory of what you're doing. Good for you for exercising your free speech. Well, the Dutch farmers were doing that. They were blocking off parts of the city and doing these sorts of things. So that's a double-edged sword where it could go both ways. But obviously, it worked out well for them thus far. And I think people are actually realizing this. So there's been a number of organized protests and things around this sort of space for the Dutch farmers, where people are like, hey, we cannot shut this down. Government, you are not representing us right now. And that's really one of the main things that I see in this. And I'll pull out with these stories. What are these podcasts, these lives all about? It's partly, as I said, trying to look at which way the wind's blowing for us as preparedness-minded individuals, so we can figure out, okay, what should we be preparing for in the future? But also, it's kind of like for austerity's measure, I guess. This is out in the interwebs now, and it always will be, that we can kind of see these as like, or the way I view it at least, kind of postcards from the apocalypse, that we're looking back now. We're going like, oh, that's interesting. There's another little data point that shows us how our civilization, as we know it, is crumbling around us. And this is, again, one of those points that we're looking at. Anytime that the government, an elected government, which the sole purpose is for it to represent the individuals within that nation or that area, when it is not doing that. And it's actually working for once, where people are going, you're not doing it, and we're voting someone else in. We also have New South Wales elections coming in where I live at the moment. I'm probably going to go vote today. So that's why it's also on my mind. Get out there and vote. Take the Ride says, the Dutch have fortitude. They are a good people. Sure, I won't disagree with that. SpyScale27 says, will Aussie farmers mobile to create a political party? We need one to stop corporate food takeover. Mobilize is what you meant. Yes. Probably not. Unfortunately, what we have is a really good marketing campaign, as far as I see it, in a party called the Nationals Party, which represents the rural Aussie battlers and blue collar and your farmers and, gumboots on and jeans and RM Williams. People believe that they represent the rural, gumboots on and jeans and RM Williams. People believe that they represent the rural section of Australia, and they, in my opinion, they do very little of that, and they just basically crawl along attached to one of the larger two parties in their pocket, essentially. Will a real party stand up in Australia that will represent these sorts of people? I doubt it. But my theory on this, as I've said this many times before, in case people don't know my particular political leanings, is I'm a libertarian. And that kind of theory, where we're like, hey, will a party step up? Will a party do this? If you're looking for a government that's going to sort things out, then you're looking in the wrong place. Right? Government isn't built to do that. The only government that I will support is one that shrinks government, that understands where their tenure should be, where it should end, what their powers should end at. And it is not interference in daily life of human beings. As a libertarian, I think people should be encouraged to be self-responsible and look after themselves. There's some high-end stuff where we need to organize and actually project ourselves out. An example of that might be military forces. And then I'm thinking, yeah, that's probably in the realm of a federal government. But other things beyond that, it should really be pushed back onto the humans. But that's just my particular slant, and you can feel free to disagree with me on that if you wish. And I would support a transparent government, says SpyScale27. I agree. Should be 100% transparent. Everything they're doing. I would even go to the point of conversations. Any conversation, anytime you step into political office, you're a public servant, and your entire life should then be exposed, and you should essentially live in a goldfish bowl where people can watch and pick apart everything that you do. When it comes to what you're doing, obviously, if you want to do weird shit in the background, go for that. All right, sticking with Australia, this was a really interesting one. I entitled this particular SitRep on YouTube, at least in part, "Will Russia Annex Australia?" Which seems pretty weird. What's that got to do with anything? An Indigenous sovereign citizen group will establish diplomatic relations with Russia. So this coming from a very outstanding source of information on the internet, crikey.com.au, crikey, sent to me by one of my main sources on Instagram. The anti-vaccine conspiracy promoting group also gave its support for the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Love how they just ram all that stuff in there together. Look at how crazy these loons are. Another interesting thing, actually, that I find interesting at least, is the loonies who are anti-vaccine and those loonies who also happen to be conspiracy theorists, and also don't support the Ukraine war. Although they don't say they don't support the Ukraine war, that's the term you don't see a lot. Oh, these people just don't support the Ukraine war. It's either you support the Ukraine war or you support Russia. So which one is it? It's like, neither actually. Don't really support a war at all. Just don't support Ukraine. Don't support sending a whole heap of our money to Ukraine. One interesting thing that I want to point out here is this an Indigenous sovereign group. And I like that hypocrisy that's there of the, if we can label it the left, everyone kind of knows it, where they're all for, yes, Indigenous rights, and we all have to be for it. And then all of a sudden there's this awkward space that I'm seeing them start to tread where they're like, look at these conspiracy theorists, look at them, they're anti-vaxxers and they're doing this. And it's like, yeah, they're also Indigenous. Yeah, well, you can see the gears grinding in their head where they're like, oh, that doesn't compute because I want to support, but I also can't support. And oh God, it hurts so much to think about it. Anyway, this particular group came out, had some photos with the Russian representative to Australia, some Russian officials. They're going to create some diplomatic relations there. And I think that's putting people a little bit awkwardly on edge again, that nobody is actually coming out and speaking out against these. If this had have been, I'll put it this way, we just had some like neo-Nazi fools doing some stuff in Victoria or whatever. If you're into that, good for you. But like, just like anyway, Nazism, I think, is just like something of a bygone era. So why are you trying to hold on to that? If they had have come out and said, hey, we're going to support Russia, we're going to create diplomatic ties with Russia, I think you'd see it all over the newspaper. I think police would be definitely looking into them. They'd be studying them. They'd be, probably making arrests even. But again, this is that awkward space where they're sort of like, oh, it's an Indigenous group. I can't go there. It's like, well, maybe we need to open up these conversations. Maybe we actually need to look at this. Maybe it's not good or bad. There's all this gray area in here. Maybe actually we need to increase relations with Russia right now, not to support the war, but to decrease the chance of war going out of hand. That's a crazy idea, though, isn't it? Morning to you, Chris Fleming on YouTube. Morning to Alpha. Thanks for joining me again. Take the Ride says, the book 1 Second After is now available on YouTube audiobook. And I've talked about this book. If people have heard this, if I've ever been talking about EMPs, I usually reference this book as one of, it is a fiction book, but it's written by somebody who has studied the effects of EMP and has written reports for the US government on what would happen in an EMP event. And then kind of felt like he wasn't getting traction. So said, hey, I'm just going to write a fictional story on this and see if this gets more attention. And it did. But what he outlines in it is a very realistic possibility that could happen if there was, say, an EMP attack on the US. So Take the Ride saying that this book is about a societal survival after an EMP. Everyone should read the book or listen to the audio book, and I agree. Fantastic book. All right. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Fun stuff going on in Australia. The other funny thing about this is when we see, like in the past, there has been a precedent set that when smaller areas that are breakaway states from certain parts of certain countries break away and establish ties with Russia, then Russia, fast forward a year, 2 years, 4 years, whatever it is, then ends up annexing that part of that country. So that was why I put that in there. Like, is Australia going to get annexed? Maybe. Who knows? All right. Here's a really interesting one that got sent to me, and this was about precious metals. It's about nickel, so it's not like a huge thing, but we're in the metals market here, and it has an extension into precious metals, which I think is important. A lot of stuff been happening around precious metals lately. We've just seen gold go through the roof, and it's easing off at the moment as a little bit of calm, I guess, is coming back into the markets now after the banking crisis that we saw last week. Personally, like this is not solid financial information or anything. This is just my hot take on it, right? I think it's all hot bluster. I think it's bullshit. I think in that the government has done enough to appease people that it's not even the government pulling the wool over the eyes at this point now. It's people literally pulling the wool over their own eyes, stock market people pulling the wool over their own eyes because they do not want to believe what is actually happening. So they will hold on to any piece of information. So the government throwing in bailouts. I've talked about this in previous SitReps. And I think it's a terrible idea. It's all bad. It's going to make things worse in the long run. But temporarily, it's eased people's fear. The collapse and subsequent bailout of Swiss credit, and yes, I said those words. It doesn't look like that if you read the mainstream media. It goes, oh, no, they were doing bad, and then their competitor came in and bought them out. Bullshit. All right. Yes, that is what happened. UBS came and bought them out for under 50% of the value of what they're already very undervalued or fallen stock was worth. But that was brokered by the government. The whole thing was orchestrated by the government. They basically came in and said to UBS, I would imagine background, something akin to, you have to buy these guys. And they're like, well, okay, yeah, it kind of makes sense that we would. And they're like, no. Sorry, that wasn't a choice. You're buying them, or we're buying them. We're probably feeding money into you to do it. We're going to make things good for you if you do it, but you have to do it. We just can't be seen to do it because then that's called a bailout and then people freak out. So we can't have people freaking out. This whole thing is about people freaking out. So anything they can do to stop people freaking out right now is what they're going to do. Lying through their teeth is what they're doing, essentially. So this whole house of cards is collapsing at the moment, and they're not even really holding it up too well. What they're actually just doing is going over here. No house of cards is collapsing. There's no house of cards collapsing. Are you listen to me? No house of cards collapsing, and in the background, the whole thing's falling apart. So I think it's only a matter of time that we start to see some real problems kick up. I think there's going to be more banks that fall to this to come. But anyway, people were freaking out, and you can tell that because gold price went up through the roof, and now people are not freaking out, and you can also tell that because gold price is easing back down a little. Now, why am I talking about precious metals? Because we had this very brief story that came in that wasn't fully verified and mysteriously kind of got washed over a little bit, where Perth Mint, one of the foremost trusted mints in the world for gold bullion, was allegedly caught selling dodgy gold, fake gold, yeah, essentially, to China. That's a huge problem. And I outlined this at the time. I said this is a huge problem because it rocks the faith in this industry when we have these people that are paragons of the industry allegedly doing this. This is not good. It's not good for anyone at all. Well, the London Metal Exchange has just found that some of its nickel underlying its contracts is missing. It's not even there. They checked. Yep, we set it on the books. We bought this. Then somebody went in there and was doing a count, doing an audit, and was like, "We're missing a whole bunch here." In the bigger scheme of things, it's like it's not negligible, but it's a tiny, tiny amount in the entire market, right? Tiny amount that they fucked up, and it's kind of, you could go, oh, okay, this is maybe an accounting error or something, but again, what does this do? What's the greater effect of this? This rocks faith in what, like, London Metal Exchange, for those who don't know, is like, I would say the excuse the pun, gold standard. It's unquestionable. If they say they have something, they have something. You do not question that ever because it's 100%. But now it's not. It doesn't matter if it was like 0.0001%. It was more than that, but it doesn't matter what it was. It was something, and that rocks faith. So now people are starting to ask the question that I have been asking for quite some time now: does London have the gold that they claim to have? Why is that important? Because many, many nations store their gold in London. We don't keep it here. Australia being one of them. We don't have our gold reserves here in Australia. They're in London, and we trust London. London does not issue serial numbers for the gold that they store. So if a nation like Australia goes, "Hey, have you got our gold?" They go, "Yes." And we go, "Cool. Can you send me some sort of proof?" "We've got it. It's good." "Okay. All right." Then, some country in Europe says, "Hey, have you got our gold?" And they're like, "Yep." "Cool. It's not the one that Australia just asked about, was it? You're not counting that same one?" No, definitely don't do that. No, we've got it all. I would be interested if every nation was to go over to London and say, we all want to see our gold separated here, and we're all going to look at each other's gold as well right now. What would actually happen? Because I don't think they've got it. Personally, I do not think they've got it. And it's stuff like this that that helps reaffirm my bias of why I think this. Let's catch up on some comments here. Take the Ride says, yes, thanks for the suggestion about the book. The book is heart-wrenching, but it has information. I totally agree with your summation there on that. Alpha says, I think it's intentional for the switch to CBDC, and I think you're right, that CBDC is coming to the point where I think CBDC is inevitable, and we're going to have to use it. But I'm not solely going to use it, if you catch my drift. Have alternatives as well. But CBDC is coming, and they are pushing it through. Take the Road says, yeah, they want us on digital. Therefore, everyone needs to start using cash and start learning how to barter with others in your nearby community. Agree. What's going on with the Chinese leader and Putin? They met. Xi Jinping. Oh, Xi. What's up, Xi? He's flown over, shook hands with Putin. The official word is they're coming out. Well, like, the whole thing was all about securing friendship, securing trade deals. Specifically, the one that I saw that was probably the big thing was LNG. So LNG coming out of Russia going into China, they're shoring up the Russian resources, and Russia on the other side is shoring up Chinese money and support. Support in what way? Support. I'm sure you can read between the lines in what's going on there. So more solidification between those two nations, but this is, BRICS Alliance doing BRICS Alliance things. And as much as the Western media would like us to believe this is the birth of the axis of evil, this is just another step in the alliance between these two nations and between the larger BRICS alliance that's been happening for a very long time. It just happens to be that they're both nations that are leave a bad taste in the mouth of the West at the moment. That's probably the nicest way I can put that. So, yeah, that's what's going on there. But expect military exchanges between those two. I'm not talking about them fighting. I'm talking about them exchanging military technology. I think primarily what we'll be seeing is probably drone or automated technology of some sort coming out of China into Russia and starting to get pumped into the Ukraine battle space. But obviously, like, this all is increasing the likelihood of larger scale war, i.e. World War III. And I've got a number of other data points here today all about that. And I might as well jump into them now. So I'll skip over some other stuff that I had here. Come back to that. And talk about all our little data points that we like to look at and go, yep, we're continuing the march into World War III. So this is one of them. Obviously, if you're a nation that's thinking about annexing a small island nation, or what you believe is part of your nation already, reunifying, i.e. what China's going to do to Taiwan in the not too distant future, you would want to start shoring up alliances. And so that's what they're doing. You would also want to start poking the hornet's nest and exacerbating other conflicts in order to distract what potential enemies you have. So China playing the long game, playing the art of war to a T. We've seen all of a sudden this increase in action from North Korea. We've seen this increase in ties between them and Russia. And like I said, I'm expecting Chinese technology to start filtering into the Ukraine battle space. And we're seeing the increase in the Ukraine battle space as well. All of this, I'm not saying it's orchestrated by China, though it might be, but it all aids China in its ultimate goal there. All of it. So whether they're pushing this or whether they're just, going, well, this is a fortunate set of events that are happening right now, they're certainly allowing it to happen. Chris Fleming says, how's the tomatoes? No frost. Hose them before the sun comes up. My tomatoes are great. I looked at them this morning. I did a fair amount of work on them last week, actually, and over the weekend. So they're all tied up. They're all trellised up. We have a tray that are ripening inside at the moment with probably about, I want to say there's about 15 tomatoes on it. I've got 11 plants. I ended up finding, because I found a couple that I thought had died and were just hidden under other stuff, and they're going great. So the tomatoes are pumping at the moment, and I'm hoping I can get a bunch more of them off before any frosts hit. But it's looking good at the moment. Got a bit of rain here as well at the moment, so I think they'll be okay. Not going to roast them on the vine. Side point. Sorry, just a tangent there about tomatoes. This could be anything, right? We're talking about geopolitics of what's going on in World War III, and all of a sudden I'm talking about how my tomato plant's going on. Welcome to... I think some people actually categorize that as ADHD, but I don't think the amount of ADHD that's actually diagnosed today is actually ADHD. I think it's just scattered minds like mine. All right, let's jump back into this. Here's a couple more data points that we want to pay attention to. Polish ambassador to France makes it clear Poland would be forced to enter the conflict should Ukraine fall. Interesting for a number of reasons here. Poland is clearly doing a build-up. Poland wants to be, by far and away, the largest army in Europe. By clear, just looking at what they're doing at the moment, you're going, this is what Poland clearly wants, and that's probably because they're at least what they're saying is that they're very afraid that they're next on the list. So once Russia takes Ukraine, in their minds, they'll roll into Poland and continue through. Poland does not want that, so they are preempting that and building up huge military forces, or at least they're attempting to do that, to stop that from happening. This is quite interesting, though, from this perspective to me. Think about the Western media, the propaganda cycle that we've seen thus far, how many times can you really remember in the past 12 months them going, when Ukraine falls, or if Ukraine falls, or anything where Ukraine fall, like in any way? It's been Ukraine cannot, we cannot allow Ukraine to fall. We cannot, it's been this very much like it's not going to happen. Ukraine will win. Well, I've been talking about this for a while, that I don't think Ukraine's doing as well as the Western media would have us believe. And now it's really starting to show. We're starting to see a number of different pieces of information coming out. They're all from different sources too, so don't take all of them as gospel. But we're starting to see things like announcement from Ukraine generals, for example, that they will not conduct certain counteroffensives. Why? Because they do not have the resources. Why is Zelensky on the world hat tour? Like, please give money to this poor country. Well, it's because they look at this situation. They go, we don't have enough here. We need more. And as much as we pump in there, they'll always need more. So it does not fare well, I believe. But when we've got nations coming out and saying, should Ukraine fall, we're having a plan for that. It kind of tells me that they're thinking that Ukraine might fall. I'm not saying this is going to happen tomorrow, by the way. This conflict, I believe, will be going on for a number of years. Unless, caveat on that, unless things go nuclear, then it'll be very, very different. I don't really know what will happen then. I can have a guess, but we will talk about that in a sec. What else is happening in Russia? The authorities of at least 18 regions of Russia will send school children to military patriotic training camps. So they are ramping up their war footing in that country. They are very much turning into a war nation right before our eyes. We're seeing it unfold. This kind of reminds me some of the stuff that I would see as a kid. Like, even as a young kid, it was still in the 80s, Cold War was still happening, and this kind of mindset that Russia was training soldiers from when they were like knee high. They were bang into it. That these people were like kind of born soldiers, really, and how bad that is. But looks like they're turning back to that way, like going to some Soviet era type schemes going on there. But nations doing that are obviously not gearing up towards a world filled with peace. They're looking at it and they're going, okay, there's going to be war, and there's going to be war for a long time. If we need to start training up children now, that's what's happening. Here's a little side one. Central African Republic, gunmen stormed a Chinese-operated gold mining site that had recently been launched in CAR, killing 9 Chinese nationals and wounding 2 others. So initial reports came out of this, and I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, that sort of stuff happens, I guess. And it said, some sort of rebel group or something. You're like, plausible. What's going on? And all of a sudden, all this information comes out and says, no, it was actually mercenaries from the Wagner Group, Russians. The Russians hit a Chinese interest in Central Africa. Okay. That's a bit different, isn't it? Aren't they just meeting with each other and shoring up alliances and that? I've said this before, Africa is really the blind spot for the West. A lot of West doesn't really want to look at it. They're like, no, I don't want to look at Africa. I don't want to know what's going on there. And China and Russia has just gone like, all right, you guys don't want it? We'll come to it. Lot of guilt there for the West. Like, oh, we really, really screwed over that country. So let's, instead of sticking around and trying to help it out and figure out ways that we can all support each other, let's just turn our back on that mess and walk away. Of course, Russia and China are eyeing it and going like, there's a lot of resources. Of course, Russia and China are eyeing it and going like, there's a lot of resources here. We can help you out. You guys need money? Well, we need resources. Let's help each other out. So they've been operating in Africa for years and years, and almost unchecked, in an almost unchecked way. In fact, in some parts of Africa, in an utterly unchecked way, they have been operating. But now, all of a sudden, they come into conflict with each other, that the Wagner Group from Russia attacks a Chinese mine. It sounds a little bit odd to me. I don't know. Does it sound odd to you that that would happen all of a sudden? I don't know. I'm going to put that one in the pile. Could be a bit of Western propaganda going on there. Here's some of the statements that came from Xi Jinping during the meeting with President Putin. There should be close relations between China and Russia. President Xi called Putin a dear friend. Dear friend. And Xi emphasized that he chose Russia for his first visit after being re-elected, just like he did 10 years ago. So, obviously the news cycle at the moment saying like, oh, they're coming together, see, it's happening. Like this shows you what I'm talking about right there. This is not something new. These guys have been hanging out and high-fiving for 10 years. These two, not to mention their nations before that. It's been going on for a long time. They're well entrenched with each other. Again, let's flick back to that last story I was talking about. Does it then make sense that Russia would attack Chinese mines? Probably not. I mean, I'm not saying they didn't. I'm just saying it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. What else we got going on here? North Korea. So I was talking about this one, that North Korea is obviously a bit of a hornet's nest that's starting to buzz very loudly, obviously firing a lot of missiles off, obviously flexing their military muscle, flopping their military wang around in everyone's face, looking, look at this new ICBM, it's bigger than yours. Well, this piece of information took the cake for me. North Korea claims 800,000 individuals joined their army in a single day. So they put out a bit of a campaign. They were saying, who wants to go fight US? And 800,000 people just rocked up to the polls and said, yep, I'll do it. North Korea has conscription, forced service, and it's not for a year or two. I think it's 10 years, maybe 15 years, at least 10 years that you have to serve in their military. I find it interesting that 800,000 just rocked up. I think this is just total bluster, but still interesting information that's coming out of there. The North Korean newspaper's Rodong Sinum says 800,000 students and workers signed up to fight the US on Friday, just one day after North Korea fired a ballistic missile into the sea between South Korea and Japan. The total number included many North Koreans who sought to re-enlist, the paper noted. This is one of the things, I guess, about having a authoritarian, totalitarian government where people have to do what you say. If the suggestion goes out and says, hey, it'd be really cool if we had a lot of people who joined up to the military right now, that's actually them coming out and saying, you will join the military right now, or you will die. When you've got that kind of choice, you're like, will I die or join the military? I might just join the military, actually. Yeah, I'll join. Here it is. North Korea military operates on a conscription system with males required to serve for 10 years and females required to serve for 3 years. Equality. There it is. Yeah, fun stuff going on. So we can see the march towards World War III speeding up. Really? Speeding up. Although I'll just put, by the way, I don't believe that actually happened. I believe North Korea is claiming that. I don't believe that 800,000 people have just volunteered to join their military. What else? I've got so many stories, by the way. If you thought this was going to be a quick one, strap in. I'm just trying to find the stuff about. Here it is. This is the last one that I'll really talk about with the Russian conflict or World War III-ish type stuff. just a few comments here on YouTube, still talking about the EMP and the electric grid. This is a really good comment, actually. Take the Ride says, the whole scenario scares the shit out of me. First and foremost, I'm worried about our electric grid. And then kind of, I think rightly says 90% of Americans would not survive. And I think after probably 3 months, at a very conservative estimate, that probably 90% of Americans or any developed country would not survive if there was no electricity grid. But this is one of the things about prepping. I think about this and I go, do I have backup energy that I can use? Yes. But what if that is also destroyed? Do I have non-electrical alternatives to the things that I need? So that's kind of the next step of prepping a lot of the time, is we sort out food and things like that, sort out energy, but sort out what are you going to do if there is none? How can you have a regenerative culture, or at least a self-sustaining culture within your own home or within your own community that doesn't require electricity? Something to think about. All right. We've got here some stuff about nukes. Let's talk about nukes. So where is it? Poland? US has delivered the M1 Abrams much quicker than we thought, so they've ramped that up a bit, which is interesting. But some other, I'm missing the key piece of information that I need. Another nation is sending in munitions, which include depleted uranium munitions, which, for those who don't know, is essentially armor piercing. So from a tank round perspective, they're very good at defeating armor. However, the Russians have previously said, so we've got a nation saying, yes, we are sending this munitions into Ukraine. That's happening. Previously, Russia has said that depleted uranium munitions is akin to a dirty bomb, because they do cause similar sort of effects. You've got possible radioactive material out in a space that could be lost too. Because here's something about war. A lot of stuff gets fired and people don't know where it goes. It's called unexploded ordnance, or UXO. And there's all this sort of shit from old war zones that's just littering in the ground that actually could go boom at any time. But depleted uranium, well, the Russians have said around that one in particular, that's akin to a dirty bomb. Next link of that, dirty bomb, and that one in particular, that's akin to a dirty bomb. Next link of that, dirty bomb is akin to nuclear activity. Nuclear activity is akin to being able to respond, because they have very specifically said, we will not do first strikes, but we will respond in kind to a nuclear attack. That's written into their law. Not into the US's, by the way. But that is written into their law. So ipso facto, we go all the way back here and we go, okay, those munitions come in. If they're fired, Russia could say that was a nuclear attack of a low level, but still a nuclear attack. Ergo, we now are able to use nuclear weapons of some sort. And this was actually kind of backed up by, I've lost the story, but by their defense minister, Shoigu. I don't know how to pronounce his name. But their defense minister has come out and said, hey, by the way, I see the reports that you're sending these depleted uranium munitions into Ukraine. Remember, we classify that as nuclear. You're exacerbating the problem here. You are increasing the threat level here. So that is probably one of the biggest steps towards World War III that I'm looking at this morning. Not a great situation. So just understand that whole thing's going on there. Alpha says, have you heard about Mexico wanting to join BRICS? I read a couple of lines on this, but I haven't really looked into it. But there is apparently at least some people within Mexican government officials reaching out and saying, look, we're thinking of joining this. Also, a massive surge of Chinese fighting age male migrants at the southern border. Doesn't seem good to me. No, if you're living in the US at the moment, that definitely would not seem good to you. But I must admit, I have not seen anything alpha on Chinese fighting age males on the southern border of US. The southern, very porous border by all accounts. Bulge, welcome, says, yo, bro, sorry got here late. Hit the like button, peeps. Always pumping it up for me, Bulge. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Because I don't say these things myself. I totally forget it. Hey, remember to subscribe and like and blah, 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 all that stuff. Help the channel grow. Why not? Get more people involved. We can have more spicy conversations if we've got more people here. We can share more information if we've got more people here. And it's not just that we have food and backup systems as individuals. How do we protect these things against a mob leaving cities? Yet another, this is from Take the Ride, and yet another really good circumstance that is highlighted in 1 second after that we have to think about. Mobs, the golden horde. How do we protect our stuff? Something I used to teach people all the time when I'm talking about survival sorts of things. I'd go, let's say, food, water, shelter, and fire or energy, ability to cook, heat, all that sort of stuff, but call it fire from a wilderness perspective. And the fifth one, security. Because if you can't secure these things, then you don't have them. So make sure that you've got food, water, you've got shelter, you've got fire, and you've got the key point there being security, that you can secure that all those other things. Because if you don't have security, then you don't have those other ones, and you are fucked. Like how I did that. Elvis says the term border is used loosely. All right, what else have I got in here? There's a whole heap of other really interesting stories that I've now just mixed up. So I'm just going to rapid fire in a shotgun scatter type approach. Egg prices are so high that one popular store has pulled them from the shelves completely. Dollar Tree in the US. No eggs on the shelves. We're pulling them. You have to ask for them if you want them. I do hear rumors, though, that egg prices are coming down in the US. So that's good news. Anytime food is coming down in price, I always think that is good. Kenya, still riots happening in Kenya. We've still got civil unrest happening in Kenya. We've still got civil unrest happening in France as well, in Paris. So these are big ones that are happening at the moment, big riots that are happening at the moment. Canada has apparently come out and said, well, signaled at least, that they're a bit jealous that Australia, Japan, India, and the US are in a quad security alliance. So they want to create their own. Justin Trudeau's like, I want to create my own. Australia, you think you got something good going on there? I want to create my own. So they want Japan, South Korea, and the United States in their little gang. Don't want to just become part of ours, just start my own quad. Because if they became part of ours, it wouldn't be a quad. So they're like, no, that's not going to work for me. What else do we have here? I can skip over that. Stay in Canada for a sec. Quebec's government-run liquor stores are doing their part to combat climate change by eliminating their refrigerators. Here's the latest thing that climate change madness is taking away from us. Cold beer. How dare they? I mean, Canada's probably pretty cold at the moment, so you don't need the cold beer. Just stick it outside for a bit. But cold beer, Aussies, it's synonymous. Nothing like walking into the bottle-o and grabbing a cold six-pack out of the fridge and cracking one open on your way out. Yeah, maybe that's going the way of the dinosaurs too. That's going to disappear. Can't do that anymore. I have to drink warm beer like bloody pommies. Ugh. Bit of a fallacy, by the way. People often say that, like, English people drink warm beer. They don't drink warm beer. They drink room temperature beer. And the room temperature in England is, I think, a lot colder than it is here in Australia. Here's another interesting one, a little tidbit about the financial markets. Investors are expecting the Fed to accept entrenched inflation. This key term twigged my alarm, and I was like, entrenched inflation. All right, there's been a lot of talk about inflation for the past 12 months. And now I want to cast everyone's mind back, because this is a process called normalization that humans do in all sorts of ways. And when I'm teaching people about situational awareness and how to survive and identify threats in your environment, one thing you have to combat is normalization, because we do it really well as humans. It's that boiling frog sort of thing. So we look around, we go, oh, that's different. And then if we see it 2 days in a row, we go, okay, maybe that's the norm now. And then that's the normal. And then we look around and go, oh, that's different. But if it's there again, we go, okay, well, that's probably normal now. And we keep doing that until finally something goes bang. And we go, I never saw it coming. Until finally, we've got people trying to force our children to sit around while somebody strips for them. And that's okay. How did we get there? Well, it was through a whole heap of steps. And those particular steps is the old adage of good intentions, paving the way to hell, or something along those lines. But anyway, here is another example of that. We're going, oh, entrenched inflation. Yeah. Well, we thought that was coming. So the markets have already factored it in. It's okay. All right. I just want to cast your mind back 12 months ago when people started saying inflation, and the Fed, the American Fed, the US Fed came out and said, no, there is no inflation. And the government said, no, there's no inflation happening. And people were like, but the data says there is. And they're going, no, we actually have to factor in all this, and we're going to do some funky economics. There, no inflation. You're right. And people are like, but I'm paying more at the Bowser, and I'm paying more at the supermarket. And they're like, this is not the inflation you're looking for. And people kind of accepted it. And then they said, all right, potential inflation in some markets a couple of months later. And then they said, yes, there's inflation, but it's transitory. We're just moving through inflation to get to our next stop, which is not inflation. And then it became less transitory. And then it became inflation. And they said, yes, it's inflation, but it's not as much inflation as we thought it was going to be. And then it became sticky inflation. And now, friends, we're at entrenched inflation, which is the soldiers have dug in and they're sitting at the parapets and they're not moving. They're holding their ground. The inflation soldiers are like, I'm not going anywhere, buddy. We're in for the long haul. Let's do it. So this is where we're at now, entrenched inflation and the admission of it. So just remember, cast your mind back, because they were telling us not so long ago, inflation, not a thing, not going to happen. Yeah. You can continue listening to them if you want. It won't work out very well. Take the Right asks, can you order antibiotics without a prescription from Australia? The answer is no, asterisk. But on the whole, no, you cannot. Before that, there was a comment. The antibiotics are the same manufacturer as the ones you get from your doctor. So in Australia, no, you cannot get antibiotics for humans without a prescription. So you need to go into a doctor and you need to say, I'm sick and I need something that requires antibiotics. And as long as they agree with you on that, then they will prescribe you said antibiotics, which you can then go and buy that one course of said antibiotics. However, there are other ways. Here are some ways you might want to explore. You could find a doctor, and especially if that doctor is more in the space of seeing people who are traveling overseas. So a travel doctor, and you can say, hey, travel doctor, I'm going to go overseas to this place here, which I know doesn't have good access to antibiotics. And I don't think anything will go wrong, but is there a chance that you could prescribe me antibiotics that I could have in a pack that I could take in a pinch? and I promise I'll adhere to all the rules. I'll take the full course of antibiotics, and I'll use them in an appropriate way, and I'll only do it in blah blah blah, and I will still see a doctor and let them know that I've taken the antibiotics, and maybe they might say yes. Or you can go into a aquarium store, one that sells stuff for fish, for pet fish, and say, do you have any amoxicillin or fish antibiotics? Actually, I have walked into a aquarium and I said, hey, do you have any amoxicillin? And they said, some what? And I said, oh, antibiotics for fish. And they went, oh yeah, how did you know it's called amoxicillin? What do you want it for? What kind of fish do you have? And I was like, the like goldfish. And they were like, yeah, we're out. We don't have any. I thought that's really interesting. So obviously they'd been warned that crazy tinfoil hat preppers, conspiracy theorists, anti-vaxxers would come in asking for amoxicillin, which is a broad spectrum antibiotic that you can use on a number of different things. So that is another way you could do it in Australia, but also be warned that maybe buy a goldfish while you do it. Alternative being that you can look into creating natural antibiotics at home. But I am a believer actually in the pharmaceutical antibiotics personally for very specific cases. I think there is a certain section of medicine where our pharmaceutical level antibiotics are appropriate. I don't take them as a matter of course. I in fact avoid them as much as possible. But if I need them, if I get to that point where I'm like, hey, I have a major infection which could potentially become a blood infection, I ain't fucking around with that shit. I will go the antibiotics, and I'll clear my gut up afterwards. I'll make sure I can sort myself and my gut bacteria. No, my gut bacteria out afterwards. But yeah, I'm not going to risk exacerbating the situation just because I don't personally like antibiotics. Anyway, that was an antibiotic rant. Italy blames Russia for surge in migration, accuses Wagner Group of hybrid warfare. So hybrid warfare being the idea that warfare is no longer fought on the battlefield. I like this story from the reason that they're highlighting this, that people need to realize that war is no longer two armies standing up and firing volleys at each other. It's not even the war that I fought over in Afghanistan anymore. That's not war anymore. That's part of it, but it's not wholly it. And that doesn't even need to be there in order for it to be war. There are other ways we fight war, and one of them is this idea of hybrid warfare, fifth generation warfare, cyber warfare. It's in spaces that we wouldn't normally think of as fighting a war. One way is creating pressure on nations by, I don't know, increasing their migration. US, what's exactly what Alpha was just talking about with the border in the US. I haven't seen anything on fighting age males, Chinese fighting age males pouring in through the southern border, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was happening. Although they wouldn't have to do that. It would be a good way to get people into the country if you want plants in there, but they wouldn't have to do that. The pressure that it's putting on the US system at the moment is there, and you just need to encourage other people who are already going to do it more, or to hijack the good intentions of the government at the moment and wrap it in some sort of humanitarian type wrapper and say, hey, wouldn't this be a good idea? And they go, yeah, that would be a good idea. And you know what? We're actually pretty crummy people. So we want people to believe we're good people. So let's signal our virtue by opening up the border. Yeah, that's a conspiracy theory. Sorry, I should have been wearing my tinfoil hat for that one. Okay, what else we got here? Oh, got this one sent to me. I thought it was just a little bit interesting. I haven't talked about this guy in a while. This was sent to me by my main source, Timothy from Kiev. Remember, I did a whole series on Timothy and his own prepping journey as he found himself in what was a quasi-war zone, I guess, in Kiev, and was pretty much utterly unprepared. And I found it utterly fascinating watching this dude live stream his stream of consciousness onto Twitter, talking about like, hey, I didn't know what to do here, and now I'm doing this. Hey, everyone, here's a good idea. I stored up some food. Hey, generators, here's all the problems that I'm having. Well, this is one that got sent to me. I thought was really interesting. He now drives everywhere with a full tank of gas in his car and 3 canisters in the trunk, which for any Aussie with a U is probably not that revolutionary. But you know, like this is somebody who's living in a city. And I thought it was fascinating. I'm like, oh, cool, like good for you. By the way, I want to put this caveat on it too. You might want to reconsider just having Jerry's in your car if you've got an enclosed car like he does, where it's a sedan car. It's got the boot, which then can vent or something like that into your car. Really think strongly about that. Petrol, and also petrol is combustible, so you know you also need to consider that. But yeah, you need to think about that jerry cans can vent, put those gases into an enclosed space. It's not good for you. So consider that as well. Consider an alternate way that you might want to do that. Maybe wrap them in something else. We'll get really, really good jerry's. Let's jump back into the US. Authorities have begun a cleanup process for 400,000 gallons of radioactive water that got purged from a nuclear power plant. So yeah, this nuclear water accidentally got put out into the into a local stream here in Minnesota. MN. Alpha, help me out here, or take the ride. Is MN Minnesota? Minnesota. But anyway, this power plant, apparently leaked all this water into the environment. Huge news. You would expect there are 3-eyed fish everywhere, that it's destroyed everything. It's a Chernobyl level event. No, it's not. It has apparently increased the level of tritium, which is what they're using in this power plant. The radioactivity, I haven't actually seen any reports on. This is one of the things about radioactive spills and things like that come out. There are definitely catastrophes that can happen about this. But this sort of information that comes out, I'm always like, oh, okay, interesting. How did this happen? Why did it happen? And also, why is it being reported now? This is, again, I think more in the vein of like, see, nuclear, look how bad it is. We should never go nuclear. It's terrible for the environment. People are going to die. We're going to have 3-eyed fish and blah, blah, blah. That's actually just not true when we stack it up. Even if we looked at all the problems that have come out from nuclear power plants, if you add it up against any other fuel source, you'd see that nuclear is still coming out on top. Does it have the potential to irradiate an area for thousands of years? Yes, it does. But mitigation strategies that we have against that would tell us that it's not really realistic that it's going to happen. Even the worst one that's happened, Chernobyl, is still, to a certain extent, mitigated. And we can do better around that as well. So, one thing that I wanted to highlight with this one coming out was like, yeah, that's bad. It's bad that this stuff gets leaked out into the environment, definitely. Also, I still am a believer in nuclear power, that this whole anti-nuclear movement where people are essentially equating nuclear bombs to nuclear energy. The two are not the same thing. They're different, and they have different effects, and they have different things that happen with them. But if you are the kind of person who likes life as it's going on, and I mean life as it's going on, as in where we've come to as a society, and the quality of life of the average human being in the developed world, which I would argue is better than any other human being in recorded history that we know of. Asterisks, obviously, obesity and issues of affluence aside, but your average person, for example, has access to more information and more nutrition than a king would 500, 600, 1,000 years ago. the people who were the richest and the most affluent people in, say, an ancient text like biblical era, like going 2 to 6,000 years ago, probably didn't have as much as you and I have right now in accessing some sort of thing. So I think like we're doing pretty well. If you want that to continue, or if you want to bring more people out of poverty and increase their quality of life, we need electricity, we need power, we need energy. Okay, you don't want coal fuel, Mr. Environmentalist. Cool. All right. I can see the problems with that. We're pumping a lot of pollution out there at the very least. That's a problem. Well, here's something called nuclear that works really well. It gives us heaps of energy. And that actually, if we handle it the right way, doesn't have all the pollution. If you want that, then that's the way to go. But unfortunately, nuclear has been on the naughty list. But if you believe that solar and wind can do it, I think you're an idiot, but go for it. Have at it. Walk down that path. See how far you can get. Anyway, cleanup is working there. Also in the US, a catastrophic train derailment. A train derailment? Oh, that's so rare. In WA, which is Washington, I believe. On tribal land. There's no hazmats on this one, they said. that was the main thing. There's train derailment, no hazmat. There's no hazardous materials on this one, so it's all good. It's a train derailment. There's something seriously wrong with the US train system at the moment. I believe it's poor maintenance that have happened and lack of funding over an amount of time, and now we're just reaping the consequences for that. I mean, the US. Australia doesn't really run on a rail system. We didn't invest in a rail infrastructure so much. So we do have one. We just don't rely on it. We rely much more on trucks. All right, what else we got? This is the last one for today, and then I'm going to wrap up. How long have we been going here? Feels like too long. Hour. Electric cars are unrepairable and unsustainable. So this is a story coming from some Russian propaganda, but they got it from Reuters. And if you ever heard me talk about this, pros and cons, but I hand on my heart, and so my biases, I do like Reuters reporting. I still put it through the same filters that I put everything through, but I have probably a little bit more trust in Reuters reporters because I've worked personally with them, and I know at least the ones I've worked with were very good. But anyway, I'm putting this one up because this is something that I agree with. Again, confirmatory bias. The EV industry's boom is casting a long shadow on EVs themselves, with many cars going out of commission due to slight damage to their unrepairable batteries. And I've talked about batteries and EVs to death, that this technology is not what people think it is. People so badly want to alleviate their guilt about how we've lived our lives, and taking on all that information that the world is going to crumble by 2022. I mean 2023. I mean 2025 now. I mean 2030. I mean, shit. How can I keep moving the apocalypse further and further away? But it's our fault. It's the climate. It's going to change. Everyone's going to die. People are so guilty from what they've personally done to exacerbate that issue that they'll do anything to try and alleviate that guilt, even spend their hard-earned dollars on an EV. I don't think EVs are a bad idea, by the way, and of themselves. I think if you're buying an EV from virtue signaling or reasons of alleviating guilt, that's probably a bad thing to do. You buy the vehicle that is most appropriate to you. That's what I think. Anyway, EVs, I don't think they have pros and cons. And one of the cons is they are actually not as sustainable as people think. And those batteries have a life to them. And what we're finding out now is those batteries have a much shorter life than often assumed. Those batteries don't just disappear. They don't get recycled. They don't, magically just last forever. They're a big, shitty mess of really horrible chemical compounds and metals jammed together that we can't do anything with at the moment. And this is what they're actually finding. According to a report by Reuters, the advertised circular economy of the environmentally friendly EV industry is starting to look more like a short, straight line with barely any damage. Still, unusable battery packs are piling up in scrapyards across the globe. So, not good information. It goes into some numbers and shit on that, but I'm not really going to dig into it. But yet another reason why EVs aren't the savior that we think they are. They're a cool car. They're a cool idea. I've considered one myself. Might be even cool from a prepping perspective for sustainability of fuel usage. If you can create your own electricity, then potentially, you've got this car, which isn't beholden to someone else, i.e. my diesel vehicle. I'm beholden to the price of diesel all the time. I'm beholden to diesel coming into my country. I don't have any control over that. And although I do have mechanisms for creating biodiesel, it's obviously a second, or I consider at least a second-rate fuel. And I've got a shiny new car that I don't want to put second-rate fuel in right now. But if I had to in a pinch, I would. But essentially, that's what I'm talking about. To secure fuel versus to secure electricity. One is easier than the other. All right, that's it for today. I'm going to cut it there because I've been talking far too long. I spent the last 2 days doing courses, talking to people, so I'm pretty tired. Done. I'm out. But this is fun talking. I like talking to you guys. I hope you like listening too, and I hope there was something worthwhile in the blabbering today of today's SitRep. Now, tonight I'm going to be doing a what do you call it? Whiskey and prepping. Well, the idea is, at least tonight, unless I fall asleep early, prepping, and it's going to be about the zombie apocalypse. Fun little one for tonight. I'm going to put a whole heap of stories up with polls, and what I want is your interaction about what you want to hear about. So we're going to put out what kind of zombie apocalypse. We're going to put in all these different things in our stories. That's me and Lauren from that InstaChick channel on YouTube, on Instagram. So please interact with the stories, give me some information, what kind of zombies, what kind of infection, how quickly it spreads, where we are in the world and that. And then we're going to nut out over a whiskey how best to survive that particular zombie apocalypse. So please join us at 8 p.m. tonight. When we do that, it'll be a hoot. It'll be a crack, as the Irish say. All right, that's it for today, gang. Thank you very much for joining me. As always, make sure you're getting out in the garden. Make sure you're moving your body physically and keeping fit and ready, because Ragnarok is not getting further away. It is probably getting closer. Remember to keep a smile on your face too. If all the things that you're doing aren't improving your life and making you a better, happier person, then are they really worth it? Because who knows? Something might happen where nothing bad ever happens in the world, and we all go, yep, that's good. So everything that you're doing should be improving your life, whether something goes shitty or whether something goes really, really well. All right, that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining me. And until next time, as always, Semper Paratus.